I met Amelia during my first year of college. From the start, we clicked like sisters. She was bold where I was cautious, loud where I was quiet, but we balanced each other out. Over the years, we became inseparable. Birthdays, breakups, job interviews, we faced everything together. When she met Daniel, I was there from the beginning. He was charming, respectful, and always knew the right thing to say. Amelia fell for him fast. I was skeptical at first, as I always am with new people, but Daniel proved to be consistent. He showed up when it mattered, supported her, and over time, I began to trust him too. When they got engaged, I was the maid of honor. I poured my heart into that wedding because Amelia deserved everything. Daniel thanked me after the ceremony, pulled me aside, and said, "You're a big reason this happened. Thank you for being her anchor." It was sweet, normal, I thought. I never imagined I'd replay those words later with a knot in my stomach. Their marriage seemed perfect from the outside. Social media full of weekend getaways, candlelit dinners, anniversary surprises. We still met up, the three of us at first, and then just Amelia and me when life got busier. I helped with her housewarming. I was the one she called during arguments, and every time they fought, I assured her Daniel loved her. I believed it too. I started seeing Daniel more during those moments, dropping off things she forgot, helping with small repairs, even just chatting when Amelia was busy. It never seemed wrong. He treated me with the same respect he always had. But I started to notice little things. His eyes lingering a second too long, compliments that felt like more than kindness. "You always listen better than anyone," he said once after venting about work. I brushed it off. One evening, after a friend's engagement party, we all had a few drinks. Daniel stood beside me and whispered, "You'd make someone an amazing wife someday." It made me uncomfortable, but I smiled and turned the conversation elsewhere. I didn't want to cause tension. But that night, lying in bed, I thought about it. Not because I wanted him, but because I didn't know why he said it to me. Amelia was radiant that night. So why had he said it? I dismissed it. One comment didn't mean anything. I wasn't naive enough to think he meant it the way it sounded. Still, something shifted. Life went on. Work kept me busy, and Amelia and I talked less frequently. Nothing seemed different on the surface, but I sensed a distance growing between us, and I couldn't explain it. I told myself it was just life pulling us in different directions. But deep down, I had a feeling I couldn't shake, a weight in my chest I didn't understand. At least, not yet. Not until the night he knocked on my door. At midnight. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not at that hour. I hesitated before opening the door, and there he was, Daniel, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, and his expression unreadable. He said he just needed someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge. My instinct said no, but my concern overruled it. I let him in, keeping my guard up, unsure why he came to me and not a friend, or even his own wife. He sat down, sighed deeply, and started talking. His words poured out like a confession. He said things had been bad between him and Amelia for months. They'd grown distant, fought over everything, stopped communicating like they used to. He admitted Amelia accused him of cheating, though he swore it wasn't true. He looked at me like he needed me to believe him, and I nodded, unsure what else to do. He said I was the only person he felt understood him, someone he could talk to without feeling judged or picked apart. I didn't know what to say. I kept reminding myself that this was Amelia's husband, my best friend's partner. But Daniel wasn't doing anything inappropriate. He was just talking. Still, the air felt heavy, like we were crossing a line without physically doing anything. He asked me if I ever thought some people just end up with the wrong person. I didn't answer. I avoided the question by saying relationships go through rough patches. He smiled sadly and said, "You've always had more empathy than most." I changed the subject. I asked if he was staying with a friend that night. He said he couldn't go anywhere else. I didn't offer for him to stay, but I didn't push him out either. He stayed for over an hour, talking, venting, sometimes just sitting in silence. At one point, he touched my hand, not in a romantic way, more like a reflex, but it lingered longer than it should have. I gently pulled away and stood to refill my glass of water. He apologized quickly. I said it was fine and it wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the truth either. There was something about the way he looked at me like he wanted me to say more, do more, but I couldn't. I wouldn't. When he finally left, I stood by the door, staring at the spot where he'd been sitting. My heart was racing, and I couldn't understand why. Nothing had happened. Not really. But something shifted that night. The unspoken weight between us had grown heavier. I felt it, even though I didn't want to. I barely slept, tossing and turning, wondering why he came to me, and why I didn't push him away harder. The next morning, I told myself it was a one-time thing, just someone needing support in a tough moment. But deep down, I knew that visit was the start of something I wouldn't be able to undo. Daniel started texting me the very next day. Just a thank you at first, saying he appreciated having someone to talk to. I replied politely, trying to keep the tone neutral. But then it became daily. Hope you're doing okay. Had a rough night again. Wish more people were like you. It wasn't flirtatious yet, but it felt too familiar. I didn't tell Amelia. I convinced myself it wasn't necessary. He was just going through something and I was just being a friend. But I started waiting for those messages without realizing it. Every buzz of my phone made my heart skip in a way it shouldn't have. Amelia came over one evening, venting about how distant Daniel had become. She cried while saying she didn't know if he still loved her. I nodded, gave her tissues, held her hand, and told her to give it time. I didn't tell her I already knew. I didn't tell her Daniel had confided in me. I sat there lying by omission, my guilt digging deeper. He came by again a few days later, saying he needed air and couldn't be at home. This time, he brought a bottle of wine. We sat, talked, and laughed, pretending things weren't as complicated as they were. He looked relaxed for the first time in weeks. The more we talked, the more it felt like he was trying to escape, not just his home, but his reality. And I was becoming his escape. I should have stopped it there, but I didn't. He started reminiscing. How things used to feel when people were honest and connections felt easy. He looked at me and said, "With you, it's always been easy." I stayed quiet, hoping silence would make it all disappear. But silence gave him space. "If things were different," he added softly, "I wonder what this would have been." He leaned in slightly. Not enough to say it was wrong, but enough to know it wasn't right. I didn't move. For a second, I felt something I shouldn't have. Curiosity, warmth, temptation. Then I pulled away. I made an excuse about being tired, stood up, and asked him to leave. He nodded, didn't argue, and walked out without another word. I locked the door and leaned against it, heart racing, ashamed. I wasn't sure what was worse, that he'd said it, or that part of me had wanted to hear it. I had let something grow in the shadows of someone else's pain, and now it was too late to claim ignorance. I hadn't touched him. I hadn't kissed him. But emotionally, I'd crossed a line. And I knew, even if Amelia never found out, I'd never look at myself the same way again. The guilt followed me everywhere, into my work, my sleep, my thoughts. I started ignoring Daniel's messages. I told myself it had to stop. But deep down, I feared that line we almost crossed wouldn't stay untouched forever. Weeks passed. I stopped responding to Daniel completely. I focused on work, avoided mutual gatherings, and tried to repair what little honesty remained in my friendship with Amelia. She noticed something was off, of course. She asked if I was okay, if something had happened. I lied. I told her I was just overwhelmed with life. Every word felt heavier than the last, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. I knew it would destroy her. But life has a way of forcing truth into the open. One evening, Amelia called me, voice shaking. She had seen the messages. Daniel had forgotten to log out of his cloud backup. Nothing overtly romantic, but enough to show that he'd been confiding in me, coming over, saying things he had no business saying to anyone but his wife. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. I had no answer that didn't sound weak or selfish. I went to see her the next day. Her eyes were red. She didn't scream, didn't cry in front of me, just stared, betrayed. "I trusted you," she said, voice low. "I always thought if Daniel ever messed up, you'd be the one to tell me first. Not the one he'd turn to." That cut deeper than yelling ever could. I tried to explain that I never meant for it to happen, that I tried to shut it down, that I didn't want him. But none of it mattered. Not to her. Not anymore. I left her house with everything broken. Her trust, our friendship, my own sense of self. Daniel tried reaching out again. I blocked him. I should have done that from the start. I was angry at him, but more than that, I was angry at myself. For not drawing the line earlier. For letting things slide under the excuse of empathy. For betraying someone who had loved me like a sister. Rumors spread. People noticed the distance between us. Friends we shared picked sides without knowing the full story. I didn't correct anyone. I figured I deserved the silence. Amelia moved out a few months later. Last I heard, she started over in another city. She never responded to my apology. I didn't blame her. Looking back, the worst part wasn't what almost happened with Daniel. It was the damage it did to something pure and real, my friendship with Amelia. I'd always thought betrayal was loud, obvious, something you saw coming. But it's not. Sometimes it's quiet. It builds slowly, through hesitation, through small excuses, through moments you don't stop when you should. And now, when I think about that midnight knock, I don't feel curiosity anymore. I feel regret. Because not every betrayal is about love or lust. Some are about loyalty. And I failed at that when it mattered most.